The stars looked different from the bridge of the stellar wind. Captain Vestar studied the readings on his screen with growing confusion. His ship had been exploring this sector for 3 months, mapping new worlds of the Zephyrian Empire. Most planets they found were empty rocks or gas giants. This one was supposed to be the same, but the sensors showed something impossible. Captain called Navigator Kixel from her station. I'm reading artificial structures on the surface and energy signatures. Vestar's blue skin turned a darker shade. In all his years exploring space, finding life was always exciting, but these readings looked too organized, too advanced for a primitive world. Show me, he ordered. The main screen displayed the planet below. It was mostly green and blue, with white clouds swirling over large continents. Beautiful, but not unusual. What made Vestar's hearts race were the geometric patterns visible from orbit, fields laid out in perfect squares, roads connecting small settlements, and in the center, a town with buildings arranged in neat rows. This can't be right, muttered Science Officer Kethran. According to our star charts, this system has never been surveyed. No one should be living here. Vestar studied the data again. The civilization below appeared to be at an early industrial level. They had electricity and basic vehicles, but no space flight technology. Standard protocol was to observe such species from a distance and slowly introduce contact over several years. Sir, Kixel said quietly, there's something else. I'm picking up radio transmissions from the surface. Can you translate them? That's the strange part. They're speaking Galactic Standard. The bridge fell silent. Galactic Standard was a common language used by all spacefaring civilizations. It took decades for a species to learn it, usually after first contact with the greater galactic community. How could a planet with no space travel know this language? Put on speakers, Vestar commanded. A voice filled the bridge, clear and calm. Unknown vessel, this is New Haven Colony Control. We see you in orbit. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. The crew exchanged shocked looks. Not only did these beings speak Galactic Standard, but they had detected the stellar wind. Their ship used advanced stealth technology that should have made them invisible to primitive sensors. Vestar activated the communications array. This is Captain Vestar of the Zephyrian Exploration Vessel Stellar Wind. We are on a peaceful scientific mission. We did not expect to find anyone on this world. A brief pause and, welcome, Captain. We've been expecting someone like you to find us eventually. Would you like to land and meet face to face? We have a landing pad prepared. They've been expecting us, whispered Ketran. Vestar considered his options. First contact protocols required careful planning and multiple safety measures. But these beings seemed friendly and spoke their language. Most importantly, they showed no signs of fear or hostility. We would be honored to meet you, Vestar replied. Please send coordinates for your landing area. The planet's surface looked even more impressive up close. As their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, the crew could see the settlement in detail. The buildings were simple but well-constructed. Solar panels covered many rooftops. Wind turbines dotted the hills around the town. Everything looked clean and organized. The landing pad was a flat area of concrete next to the main settlement. A small group of beings waited for them, standing in a relaxed formation. They were bipedal, roughly the same height as Zephyrians, but with different features. Their skin was various shades of brown and pink instead of blue. They had hair on their heads in different colors, and they were smiling. Vestar led his crew down the shuttle ramp. The planet's air was breathable for Zephyrians, which was another pleasant surprise. A tall male with dark hair stepped forward. Welcome to New Haven, he said, extending his hand. I'm Jake Mitchell, governor of this colony. These are my colleagues, Lisa Murphy, our chief engineer, and Ryan Clark, our administrator. Vestar had read about this gesture in xenobiology texts. A handshake was a sign of peaceful greeting among many species. He reached out and grasped Jake's hand, noting the firm but friendly grip. Thank you for welcoming us. Vestar said, I must ask, what species are you? Our databases have no record of your people. Jake's smile widened. We're humans, Captain. And I'm not surprised you don't have records of us. It's been a long time since anyone has seen our kind in this part of the galaxy. Humans, repeated Kethran, scanning his portable database. I'm sorry, but I find no reference to your species in our archives. That's not surprising, said Lisa, a woman with short blonde hair. We've been keeping to ourselves for the past few centuries. Your people probably thought we went extinct. Ryan, a man with graying hair and kind eyes, gestured toward the settlement. Why don't we show you around? You must have questions about how we ended up here. As they walked toward the town, Vexthar studied his hosts. They moved with confidence and seemed genuinely happy to meet alien visitors. Most primitive species were either terrified or aggressive during first contact. These humans acted like they had been expecting this meeting all along. How long have you been on this world? Asked Kixel. About 50 years, Jake replied. My grandparents were among the original colonists. We built a good life here. But how did you learn Galactic Standard? Kethran pressed. And how did your sensors detect our ship? Lisa exchanged a quick glance with Ryan before answering. Our ancestors had some contact with other spacefaring species before we came here. They taught us a few things. The answer felt incomplete, but Vexthar didn't want to push too hard during their first meeting. As they entered the settlement, he was impressed by what he saw. The streets were clean and well-maintained. Gardens flourished between buildings. Children played in small parks, while adults worked in shops and small factories. Your colony seems very successful, observed Vexthar. This planet doesn't appear to be particularly hospitable. How do you produce enough food? We've gotten good at working with what we have. Ryan said simply, would you like to see our agricultural areas? We're quite proud of what we've accomplished. As they continued the tour, Vexthar noticed more details that didn't quite fit. The technology was more advanced than it should be for a recently established colony. The humans seemed remarkably calm about meeting aliens. And there was something in their eyes, a depth of knowledge that suggested they knew more than they were saying. We'd be happy to show you everything, Jake said as they walked. But it might take a while. We have a lot to share. Vexthar nodded, but he was beginning to suspect that these humans had far more secrets than they were revealing. The question was, what were they hiding and why? The next morning, Dr. Kethran woke up with more questions and answers. He had spent the night in the guest quarters that the humans had prepared for the Zephyrian crew. The room was comfortable and clean, but something felt wrong about everything he had seen. During breakfast in the colony's community center, he watched the humans interact with each other. They seemed relaxed and happy, like any normal settlement. But Kethran had studied hundreds of colonies across the galaxy, and this one was different. Jake, he said, approaching the governor, I'd like to study your agricultural systems today, if that's possible. I'm curious how you've adapted to this planet's soil. Jake smiled and nodded. Of course. Alex Rodriguez, our security chief, can show you around. He knows our farming areas better than anyone. Alex was a stocky man with dark skin and friendly eyes. As they walked toward the fields outside town, he pointed out various features of the settlement. We've been lucky with this planet, Alex said. The soil is actually pretty good once you know how to work with it. Kethran pulled out a scanner and took readings of the farmland. What he saw made no sense. According to his instruments, the soil should barely support basic plant life. It was too acidic and lacked essential nutrients. Yet the fields around them were full of healthy crops. This is remarkable, Kethran said, checking his scanner again. How do you get such good yields from this soil? Alex scratched his head. Well, we've learned a few tricks over the years. Crop rotation, natural fertilizers, that sort of thing. But Kethran's readings showed something impossible. The plants were growing at nearly 3 times the normal rate for their species. The corn stalks were twice as tall as they should be. The vegetables were larger and healthier than anything he had seen on worlds with perfect growing conditions. Alex, these readings don't make sense. Your crops are growing far better than they should be able to on this planet. What aren't you telling me? Alex looked uncomfortable. Maybe you should talk to Maya Patel. She's our head scientist. She understands the technical stuff better than I do. They found Maya in a laboratory building near the center of town. She was a woman in her 30s with long black hair and intelligent brown eyes. When Alex explained Kethran's questions, Maya invited them to sit down. "You're right to be curious," Maya said carefully. "We have developed some unusual techniques for farming on this world." She led them to a window that looked out over the fields. "The secret is in understanding how different plant species interact with soil chemistry. We've learned to modify the growing environment in ways that most agricultural scientists haven't discovered yet." Kethran studied her face. Maya was clearly intelligent and knowledgeable, but she was being vague about specifics. "Could you show me these techniques? I'm very interested in how you've solved these agricultural problems." Maya hesitated. "Some of our methods are hard to explain. They involve processes that might seem strange to outside observers." Before Kethran could ask more questions, Ryan Clark appeared in the doorway. "Maya, could you show our guest a fusion reactor? I think he'd find our energy systems interesting." Maya's face brightened. "Oh yes, that's a good idea. Dr. Kethran, you'll love seeing how we generate power for Colony." They walked to a building on the edge of town. Inside, Kethran found himself looking at a fusion reactor that should not have existed. The design was far beyond what a small colony should be able to build or maintain. "This is incredible," Kethran said, studying the reactor. "How did you acquire this technology?" The next morning, Dr. Kethran woke up with more questions than answers. He had spent the night in the guest quarters that the humans had prepared for the Zephyrian crew. The room was comfortable and clean, but something felt wrong about everything he had seen. During breakfast in the colony's community center, he watched the humans interact with each other. They seemed relaxed and happy, like any normal settlement. But Kethran had studied hundreds of colonies across the galaxy, and this one was different. "Jake," he said, approaching the governor, "I'd like to study your agricultural systems today, if that's possible. I'm curious how you've adapted to this planet's soil." Jake smiled and nodded. "Of course. Alex Rodriguez, our security chief, can show you around. He knows our farming areas better than anyone." Alex was a stocky man with dark skin and friendly eyes. As they walked toward the fields outside town, he pointed out various features of the settlement. "We've been lucky with this planet," Alex said. "The soil is actually pretty good once you know how to work with it." Kethran pulled out a scanner and took readings of the farmland. What he saw made no sense. According to his instruments, the soil should barely support basic plant life. It was too acidic and lacked essential nutrients. Yet the fields around them were full of healthy crops. "This is remarkable," Kethran said, checking his scanner again. "How do you get such good yields from this soil?" Alex scratched his head. "Well, we've learned a few tricks over the years. Crop rotation, natural fertilizers, that sort of thing." But Kethran's readings showed something impossible. The plants were growing at nearly 3 times the normal rate for their species. The corn stalks were twice as tall as they should be. The vegetables were larger and healthier than anything he had seen on worlds with perfect growing conditions. "Alex, these readings don't make sense. Your crops are growing far better than they should be able to on this planet. What aren't you telling me?" Alex looked uncomfortable. "Maybe you should talk to Maya Patel. She's our head scientist. She understands the technical stuff better than I do." They found Maya in a laboratory building near the center town. She was a woman in her 30s with long black hair and intelligent brown eyes. When Alex explained Kethran's questions, Maya invited them to sit down. "You're right to be curious," Maya said carefully. "We have developed some unusual techniques for farming on this world." She led them to a window that looked out over the fields. "The secret is in understanding how different plant species interact with soil chemistry. We've learned to modify the growing environment in ways that most agricultural scientists haven't discovered yet." Kethran studied her face. Maya was clearly intelligent and knowledgeable, but she was being vague about specifics. "Could you show me these techniques? I'm very interested in how you've solved these agricultural problems." Maya hesitated. "Some of our methods are hard to explain. They involve processes that might seem strange to outside observers." Before Kethran could ask more questions, Ryan Clark appeared in the doorway. "Maya, could you show our guest a fusion reactor? I think he'd find our energy systems interesting. Maya's face brightened. Oh, yes, that's a good idea. Dr. Kethran, you'll love seeing how we generate power for the colony. They walked to a building on the edge of town. Inside, Kethran found himself looking at a fusion reactor that should not have existed. The design was far beyond what a small colony should be able to build or maintain. This is incredible, Kethran said, studying the reactor. How did you acquire this technology? We built it ourselves, Maya said proudly. It took us several years, but we managed to figure out the engineering. Kethran checked his readings again. The reactor was operating at efficiency levels that exceeded anything in Zephyrian technology. According to his instruments, it was producing 300% more energy than should be theoretically possible. Maya, this is impossible. Your reactor is violating several laws of physics. How are you achieving these efficiency rates? Maya exchanged a quick look with Ryan. We've made some improvements to the standard fusion design. Small modifications that help optimize the reaction. What kind of modifications? Well, it's quite technical, Maya said, avoiding his eyes. We've adjusted the magnetic containment fields and modified the fuel mixture. Nothing too dramatic. But Kethran could see that she was lying. The technology in front of him was decades ahead of anything the Zephyrian Empire possessed. A small human colony should not have been able to develop such advanced systems. I'd like to see your medical facilities next, he said, deciding to try a different approach. Dr. Kate Williams ran the colony's medical center. She was a tall woman with red hair who greeted them with a warm smile. The medical building was small but well-equipped. Too well-equipped. Kethran recognized some of the medical devices, but others were completely unfamiliar. The diagnostic equipment looked more advanced than what most galactic hospitals used. This is impressive, he said, examining a medical scanner. Where did you get these devices? We built most of them here, Kate replied. We've had to become very self-sufficient on this world. You built these? How? Kate showed him around the facility, pointing out various pieces of equipment. She explained how they treated common illnesses and injuries, but Kethran noticed she avoided discussing the more advanced technology. Dr. Williams, this medical scanner uses quantum resonance technology that most civilizations haven't developed yet. How could a colony of a few thousand people create such sophisticated equipment? Kate paused. We've had some very clever engineers over the years, people who were good at figuring out how things work. But quantum resonance requires materials that don't exist on this planet. You'd need to import them from industrial worlds. Well, Kate said slowly, we've been very resourceful. As the day continued, Kethran visited more areas of the colony. Each location revealed new impossibilities. The water treatment plant used filtration technology he didn't recognize. The manufacturing facilities produced alloys that shouldn't have been possible with their equipment. The communications center had systems that could reach across star systems. That evening, Kethran met with Captain Vexar and the other crew members who had spent the day exploring different parts of the colony. Captain, Kethran said quietly, something is very wrong here. These humans have technology that exceeds our own capabilities in several areas. They claim to have developed it themselves, but that's impossible. Navigator Kixel nodded in agreement. I examined their transportation systems. They have vehicles that run on power sources I can't identify, and their computer networks use processing methods I've never seen before. Captain Vexar looked troubled. The humans have been very friendly and helpful, but I agree that something doesn't add up. They're hiding something from us. The question is what, said Kethran, and why are they pretending to be a simple colony when they clearly have access to advanced technology? Through the window of their guest quarters, they could see the lights of New Haven glowing softly in the darkness. The settlement looked peaceful and ordinary, but Kethran now knew that appearances could be deceiving. Tomorrow, Captain Vexar decided, we'll ask more direct questions. These humans may be friendly, but they're not telling us the truth about who they really are. Kethran agreed, but part of him wondered if they really wanted to know the answers. Something told him that the secrets of New Haven were bigger and more important than they had imagined. Historian Kel Knox had not slept well. Her job on the Stellar Wind was to research any civilizations they encountered, but the humans of New Haven were proving to be a puzzle. She had spent most of the night searching through the ship's historical databases, looking for any mention of humans or their homeworld. What she found disturbed her. The next morning, she requested a private meeting with Captain Vestan before they returned to the colony. In his ready room, she spread out her research on the main display screen. "Captain, I've been studying our historical records about humans, and there are some very strange gaps in our data." Vestan studied the timeline she had created. "What kind of gaps?" "According to our files, humans came from a planet called Earth in the Sol system. They achieved spaceflight about 300 years ago and began establishing colonies. But then, roughly 200 years ago, all record of human activities suddenly stopped." "What happened to them?" Kelnox shook her head. "That's just it. Nobody seems to know. There are no records of wars, natural disasters, or any other catastrophe. Humans simply disappeared from all official records. Most galactic civilizations assumed they went extinct. But clearly they didn't," Vestan observed. "No, and that's not the strangest part." Kelnox called up another set of data. "I started looking for other unexplained disappearances in galactic history. Captain, in the past 1,000 years, 17 different civilizations have vanished without explanation." Vexthar's skin darkened with concern. 17? That seems like a lot. "It gets worse." I cross-referenced the disappearance dates with report to primitive settlements found in remote systems. Kelnox highlighted several entries. In 12 of those cases, exploration teams discovered small colonies of unknown species within 50 years of a civilization vanishing. "You think there's a connection?" "I'm starting to suspect these unknown species might have been humans using different names or altered appearances." Vestan stared at the data. "Why would humans hide their identity? And what does this have to do with vanishing civilizations?" "I don't know yet," Kelnox admitted. "But I think we need to ask some harder questions when we go back down to the colony." When they returned to New Haven, the humans greeted them with the same friendly smiles as before. Jake Mitchell offered to continue their tour, but Kelnox had other plans. "I'd like to visit your school," she said. "I'm interested in learning about human history and culture." Jake's smile flickered slightly. "Of course. Ben Harris is our main teacher. He'd be happy to talk with you." The school was a simple building where about 30 children of various ages learned together. Ben Harris was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He seemed genuinely excited to meet an alien historian. "This is wonderful," Ben said as they sat in his classroom. "The children have so many questions about other worlds and species." Kelnox smiled. "I'd be happy to answer them. But first, could you tell me about human history? I'm particularly interested in how your people came to this world." Ben's expression became thoughtful. "Well, that's quite a story. Our ancestors traveled here from Earth about 50 years ago, as I'm sure Jake mentioned." "Why did they leave Earth?" "They were looking for a new home. Earth had become crowded. They wanted to start fresh on a world where they could live peacefully." Kelnox studied his face. Ben seemed sincere, but something felt rehearsed about his answer. "What was Earth like? Did your ancestors tell stories about their homeworld?" "Oh, yes, many stories. Earth was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green forests. Our ancestors talked about great cities and amazing technology. What happened to Earth after your people left?" Ben hesitated. "I'm not really sure. We lost contact with the homeworld after the colony ships departed." As Ben continued talking, Kelnox noticed that his stories about Earth were very general. He spoke about oceans and forests, but no specific cities or countries. He mentioned technology, but no details about what kind of machines humans had built. "Ben, did your ancestors keep any record from Earth?" "Books, videos, historical documents." "Some," Ben said carefully, "but a lot was lost during the journey here. Space travel is hard on old records." A young girl in the class raised her hand. "Mr. Harris, can you tell the alien lady about the memory keepers?" Ben's face went pale. "Lucy, I think that's enough questions for today. Why don't you all go outside for recess?" As the children filed out, Kel Knox caught Ben's arm. What are memory keepers? Oh, that's just something the children made up. Kids have such active imaginations. But Kel Knox could see he was lying. Before she could ask more questions, Kate Williams appeared in the doorway. Ben, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you come with me? There's an emergency at the medical center. Ben looked relieved to have an excuse to leave. After he hurried away with Kate, Kel Knox sat alone in the empty classroom, thinking about what she had learned. She decided to walk around the colony on her own, hoping to observe the humans when they didn't know she was watching. As she wandered through the streets, she noticed small details that seemed odd. Many of the buildings had symbols carved into their walls. Not human writing, but marks that looked like they came from other species. In one garden, she saw plants that weren't native to this world or to Earth. The colony's library contained books written in languages she recognized as belonging to extinct civilizations. At the communication center, she met Kate Williams again. Kate was working at a console covered with switches and displays that looked nothing like human technology. This is an interesting communication system, Kel Knox observed. Kate jumped slightly, apparently not having heard her approach. Oh, yes. We've had to adapt our equipment to work with this planet's electromagnetic field. But Kel Knox recognized some of the symbols on the console. They were from the Veltar civilization, which had disappeared 400 years ago. Kate, where did you learn to use Veltar communication protocols? Kate's face went white. What do you mean? These symbols on your console, they're Veltar script. That civilization has been extinct for centuries. Kate stared at her for a long moment, then quickly began shutting down the equipment. I think there's been some mistake. I don't know what you're talking about. That evening, Kel Knox shared her discoveries with the rest of the Zephyrian crew. Captain Vexlar listened with growing alarm as she described the Veltar symbols, the non-human plants, and the child's mention of memory keepers. Captain, Kel Knox said quietly, I think these humans are connected to the civilizations that have been disappearing. I don't know how or why, but there are too many coincidences. Dr. Kethran nodded. And their technology is far too advanced for a simple colony. They're hiding something big. Navigator Kixel pulled up a star chart. I've been analyzing their communication signals. Some of them are using encryption methods from species that supposedly went extinct decades ago. Captain Vex there stood and looked out at the colony lights. Tomorrow, we're going to demand some real answers. These humans may seem friendly, but they're keeping secrets that could affect the entire galaxy. Kel Knox agreed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting close to uncovering something that the humans desperately wanted to keep hidden. The question was whether the truth would be more dangerous than the lies they had been told. Dr. Zixera was the Stellar Winds archaeologist, and she had been getting more suspicious with each passing day. The humans kept showing them surface facilities and talking about their simple colony life, but her scanners detected much more activity underground and above. That morning, she approached Jake Mitchell with a direct request. Jake, my instruments show extensive structures beneath your colony. I'd like to see your mining operations. Jake's friendly smile seemed forced. Mining operations? Oh, we do a little mineral extraction for basic needs. Nothing too exciting. My readings suggest the underground areas are quite large. Could you show me? Jake hesitated, then nodded slowly. I suppose we could take a quick look. Tony Garcia manages our mining crew. He can show you around. Tony was a big man with calloused hands and dirt under his fingernails. He looked like he actually worked in mines, which made Zixera feel a bit better. But when they reached the mine entrance, her suspicions returned. The entrance was just a simple tunnel leading into the hillside, but her scanners detected massive spaces beyond what she could see. The technology readings were off the charts. How deep do your mines go? She asked Tony as they walked into the tunnel. Oh, not too deep, Tony said, but he avoided looking at her. We just need basic materials for the colony. They walked for about 10 minutes through rough-cut tunnels that looked appropriately primitive. But Zixera's portable scanner kept showing large chambers and advanced technology somewhere below them. Tony, I'm reading massive structures beneath us. Are there lower levels to these mines? Tony stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was serious now, not the casual friendliness she had seen before. Dr. Zixera, How important is it to you to see everything? Very important. I'm an archaeologist. Understanding underground structures is my specialty. Tony sighed deeply. Then I guess we need to show you the truth. But first, I need to ask you something. If you saw things down here that could put people in danger, would you keep them secret? Zixera felt a chill run through her. What kind of danger? The kind that could get entire civilizations destroyed. Tony led her to what looked like a dead end in the tunnel. But when he pressed his hand against a certain spot on the wall, a hidden door slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond was a corridor lined with smooth metal walls and lit by soft blue lights. This isn't a mine, is it? Zixera asked. No, Tony said quietly. It's something much more important. They walked through corridors that extended far beyond what should have been possible under the small colony. The architecture was strange. It seemed to combine design elements from multiple civilizations. Some walls had the flowing curves of Veltar construction, while others showed the geometric patterns of the extinct Mordak people. Tony, this is impossible. How long have you been building down here? We didn't build most of this, Tony replied. We're just maintaining it. They entered a vast chamber that took Zixera's breath away. The space was enormous, easily the size of a small city. But what filled it was even more amazing. Thousands of crystalline storage units lined the walls, each one glowing with soft internal light. Between them were displays showing star charts, historical records, and technical diagrams from dozens of different civilizations. In the center of the chamber stood machines that Zixera didn't recognize, but which hummed with obvious power. What is this place? She whispered. This is one of the preservation chambers. Tony said. We have 17 more like it under the colony. Zixera walked closer to one of the storage units. Inside the crystal, she could see what looked like books, artwork, and technological devices. The label was written in Kethmoran script, another civilization that had vanished centuries ago. These are artifacts from extinct species, she said, her voice filled with awe. Not just artifacts, Tony corrected. Their entire cultural heritage. Art, music, literature, scientific knowledge, philosophical traditions, everything that made them who they were. Dr. Rachel Stone emerged from behind one of the larger machines. She was a woman in her 40s, with graying hair and tired eyes. When she saw Zixera staring at the storage units, she approached them. I suppose it's time for the full explanation, Rachel said to Tony. Dr. Zixera, what do you know about species extinction patterns in this galaxy? I know that many civilizations have disappeared over the past millennium, Zixera replied. But archaeologists assume they were destroyed by wars, natural disasters, or resource depletion. Rachel shook her head. Most of those civilizations didn't die naturally. They were hunted. She led them to a display showing a map of the galaxy with red markers scattered across it. Each of these markers represents a civilization that was completely wiped out, not just defeated in war or weakened by disaster. Completely erased from existence. Zixera studied the map. The pattern of destruction seemed random at first, but then she noticed something. These extinctions, they're spreading outward from the galactic core. Exactly, Rachel said. Something is systematically destroying intelligent life, moving from system to system. Most species don't realize what's happening until it's too late. But what does this have to do with humans? And why are you preserving these artifacts? Rachel touched one of the storage crystals gently. Humans discover we have a unique ability. Our brains can interface with almost any alien technology and store vast amounts of cultural information. When a civilization realizes they're about to be destroyed, some of them find us. Find you? They come to human colonies like this one. We help them preserve their cultural essence, their knowledge, their art, their entire way of thinking inside special storage systems. The physical civilization dies, but their culture survives. Tony gestured toward the thousands of storage units. Every crystal you see here contains a complete cultural heritage of an extinct species. We're not just miners or farmers. We're librarians for the galaxy. Zixera felt overwhelmed by the implications. How many species have you preserved? In this facility alone? About 60, Rachel replied. Across all human colonies? Over 400. 400 extinct civilizations? And counting. The destruction is accelerating. We're getting refugees almost every month now. Zixera walked among the storage units, reading the labels, names of species she had only heard about in archaeological texts, civilizations that scholars thought had simply faded away or destroyed themselves. Why keep the secret? She asked. This is the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history. Rachel's expression darkened, because if the wrong people find out about this, they'll either try to steal the stored cultures or destroy them completely. And worse, they might figure out the pattern of destruction and panic. What pattern? Tony and Rachel exchanged a worried look. The extinctions aren't random, Tony said quietly. Whatever is destroying these civilizations is moving in a specific direction. And according to our calculations, it's heading toward the core worlds of the major galactic powers. Including Zephyrian space? Zixera asked. Yes, Rachel said simply. Your people might have 50 years before it reaches your homeworld. Maybe less. Zixera stared at the thousands of preserved cultures surrounding her. Each crystal represented an entire civilization that had once thrived among the stars. Now they existed only as stored memories in a human facility hidden beneath a simple colony. This is why you've been so secretive, she realized. You're not just protecting yourselves. You're protecting the last remnants of hundreds of civilizations, and potentially preparing to preserve yours, Rachel added quietly. The weight of this revelation hit Zixera like a physical blow. The friendly human colony on the surface was just a cover for something far more important. A desperate attempt to save some trace of galactic civilization from complete destruction. I need to tell my captain about this, she said. We know, Tony replied. That's why we're showing you. It's time for the galaxy to know what's coming. That evening, Captain Vex called an emergency meeting aboard the Stellar Wind. Dr. Zixera had shared her discovery with the crew, and everyone was struggling to understand what they had learned. For 100 extinct civilizations, Navigator Kixel said quietly, How is that possible? How could so many species disappear without anyone noticing a pattern? The humans have been covering it up, Dr. Kethran replied, but not for evil reasons. They're trying to save what they can. Captain Vex studied the data Zixera had collected. We need to understand more about how this preservation process works. And we need to know who or what is destroying these civilizations. The next morning, they returned to New Haven with serious questions. Jake Mitchell met them at the landing pad, and his usual cheerful expression was gone. I understand you've seen the preservation facility, he said simply. I suppose you want to know everything now. Yes, Captain Vexar replied, starting with how humans can store alien cultures. Jake nodded and led them to a building they hadn't visited before. Inside, they found what looked like a medical facility combined with a computer center. An elderly man with white hair and gentle eyes was waiting for them. This is Nick Turner, Jake said. He's one of our council elders and can explain the process better than I can. Nick gestured for them to sit in comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but it's the truth. Humans possess a genetic trait that allows our brains to interface directly with most forms of alien technology and data storage. Interface how? Asked Dr. Kethran. We can form neural connections with alien computers and download their entire cultural databases into our own minds. Not just facts and figures, but actual thought patterns, emotions, and ways of understanding the universe. Vexed, felt his skin turn pale. You mean humans can think like other species? Not just think like them, Nick corrected. We can become them, in a sense. When we preserve civilization, we don't just store their books and art. We store their consciousness patterns, their entire way of experiencing reality. He stood and walked to a wall covered with photographs of humans. Every person in these pictures carries a preserved consciousness of at least one extinct species. Some carry more. More than one? Kixel asked. Much more. I personally carry the cultural patterns of 7 different civilizations. Nick touched one of the photographs, a woman with sad eyes. Grace Kelly there carries 12. Paul Davis is 14. The record is held by someone who carries the patterns of 23 extinct species. Dr. Kethran studied the photographs. Now that he looked closely, He could see something different in the human's eyes, a depth and complexity that spoke of experiences beyond a single lifetime. "How do you do this without going insane?" he asked. Nick's expression became grave. "Many of us don't handle it well. The human mind wasn't designed to hold multiple consciousness patterns. We suffer from what we call memory bleeding, moments when we experience the thoughts and emotions of the extinct species we carry." He led them to another room where a young woman sat staring out a window. She was perfectly still, but tears were flowing down her face. "Lisa is experiencing a memory bleed from the Korthal civilization," Nick explained quietly. "Their species felt emotions much more intensely than humans do. When their memories surface, it can be overwhelming." "How often does this happen?" Vexthar asked. "For most of us, several times a day. Some people handle it better than others. We've learned techniques to manage the bleeding, but it never completely stops." They visited Grace Kelly at the medical center. She was the woman Nick had mentioned who carried 12 extinct species. When they met her, she seemed normal at first, but as they talked, her personality seemed to shift and change. That evening, Captain Vexthar called an emergency meeting aboard the Stellar Wind. Dr. Zixera had shared her discovery with the crew, and everyone was struggling to understand what they had learned. For 100 extinct civilizations, Navigator Kixel said quietly, "How is that possible? How could so many species disappear without anyone noticing a pattern?" "The humans have been covering it up," Dr. Kethran replied, "but not for evil reasons. They're trying to say what they can." Captain Vexthar studied the data Zixera had collected. "We need to understand more about how this preservation process works. And we need to know who or what is destroying these civilizations." The next morning, they returned to New Haven with serious questions. Jake Mitchell met them at the landing pad, and his usual cheerful expression was gone. "I understand you've seen the preservation facility," he said simply. "I suppose you want to know everything now." "Yes," Captain Vexthar replied, "starting with how humans can store alien cultures." Jake nodded and led them to a building they hadn't visited before. Inside, they found what looked like a medical facility combined with a computer center. An elderly man with white hair and gentle eyes was waiting for them. "This is Nick Turner," Jake said. "He's one of our council elders and can explain the process better than I can." Nick gestured for them to sit in comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but it's the truth. Humans possess a genetic trait that allows our brains to interface directly with most forms of alien technology and data storage." "Interface how?" asked Dr. Kethran. "We can form neural connections with alien computers and download their entire cultural databases into our own minds. Not just facts and figures, but actual thought patterns, emotions, and ways of understanding the universe." Vexthar felt his skin turn pale. "You mean humans can think like other species?" "Not just think like them," Nick corrected. "We can become them. In a sense, when we preserve a civilization, we don't just store their books and art. We store their consciousness patterns, their entire way of experiencing reality." He stood and walked to a wall covered with photographs of humans. "Every person in these pictures carries a preserved consciousness of at least one extinct species. Some carry more. More than one?" Kixel asked. "Much more. I personally carry the cultural patterns of 7 different civilizations." Nick touched one of the photographs, a woman with sad eyes. "Grace Kelly there carries 12. Paul Davis is 14. The record is held by someone who carries the patterns of 23 extinct species." Dr. Kethran studied the photographs. Now that he looked closely, he could see something different in the human's eyes, a depth and complexity that spoke of experiences beyond a single lifetime. "How do you do this without going insane?" he asked. Nick's expression became grave. "Many of us don't handle it well. The human mind wasn't designed to hold multiple consciousness patterns. We suffer from what we call memory bleeding, moments when we experience the thoughts and emotions of the extinct species we carry." He led them to another room where a young woman sat staring out a window. She was perfectly still, but tears were flowing down her face. "Lisa is experiencing a memory bleed from the Korthal civilization," Nick explained quietly. "Their species felt emotions much more intensely than humans do. When their memories surface, It can be overwhelming. How often does this happen? Vexthar asked. For most of us, several times a day. Some people handle it better than others. We've learned techniques to manage the bleeding, but it never completely stops. They visited Grace Kelly at the medical center. She was a woman Nick had mentioned who carried 12 extinct species. When they met her, she seemed normal at first, but as they talked, her personality seemed to shift and change. The preservation process is beautiful and terrible, she said in a voice that didn't quite sound human. We become the keepers of memories that would otherwise be lost forever, but we lose ourselves in the process. What do you mean? Asked Zixara. Grace's eyes changed, becoming deeper and more alien. I remember being born under 3 purple suns on a world of crystal forests. I remember the songs my nest mothers sang to calm the storm winds. But I also remember being human, playing in Earth's green fields before the evacuation. Her voice changed again, taking on different rhythms. I remember the great libraries of Vorth Prime, where knowledge was stored in living crystals that sang with accumulated wisdom, the taste of methane rain on my sensory fronds, the joy of mathematical discovery that could make an entire population dance. Grace, Nick said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Come back to us. Grace blinked and her eyes became human again. Sorry, sometimes they're stronger than I am. Sam Brooks, the colony psychologist, explained the mental health challenges they faced. About 30% of our preservation specialists suffer from severe identity displacement. They lose track of which memories are originally human and which come from the stored species. We have the highest suicide rate of any human colony, he continued sadly. Some people can't handle carrying the grief of entire extinct civilizations. Others become so lost in alien thought patterns that they forget how to be human. Paul Davis was one of the most experienced preservation specialists. When they met him, he seemed to flicker between different personalities as he spoke. The Yithmore were a hive mind, he said, his voice taking on a strange resonance. Their individual thoughts were like drops in an ocean of shared consciousness. When I carry their patterns, I can feel the loneliness of being cut off from collective. His expression shifted. But the Feltar were completely individualistic. They believed that sharing thoughts was a form of pollution. When their memories surface, I become terrified of mental connection with others. How do you function with such conflicting thought patterns? Dr. Kethran asked. Paul smiled sadly. Most days I don't function very well. But this is the price we pay to keep these cultures alive. They visited the colony's memorial garden, where small monuments honor humans who had died from the psychological strain of preservation work. Nick read some of the names aloud. Marcus Webb carried the memories of the Zethkara, a species that experienced time differently than humans. He became lost in their nonlinear thought patterns and couldn't find his way back to sequential human consciousness. Jenny Foster preserved the Morgeth civilization, but their species had evolved from predators with violent instincts. Their aggressive memories eventually overwhelmed her human personality completely. Emma Clark specialized in preserving artistic species. She carried the aesthetic sensibilities of 8 different civilizations, but the conflicting beauty standards drove her to madness. Captain Vexar felt sick as he realized the true cost of humanity's preservation work. Why do you do this? Why sacrifice your own people to save extinct civilizations? Nick looked out over the memorial garden. Because someone has to. If we don't preserve these cultures, they disappear forever. Every extinct species takes unique knowledge, perspectives, and ways of understanding the universe with them when they die. But it's such a terrible cost. Yes, Nick agreed. The cost is terrible. We lose friends, family members, sometimes entire communities to the psychological strain. But we've made a choice as a species. We'd rather sacrifice ourselves and let galactic civilization disappear completely. Grace Kelly joined them in the garden, her eyes clear and human for the moment. The universe is becoming smaller and darker with each civilization that dies. If we can preserve even fragments of who they were, maybe someday the galaxy can be rebuilt. When whatever is destroying us finally passes, Paul added, his voice shifting between human and alien inflections. As they walked back toward the colony center, Vexthar understood why the humans had been so secretive. They weren't just hiding their preservation work. They were hiding their own suffering and sacrifice. "How many humans have died for this cause?" he asked. "Thousands," Jake replied quietly. "Maybe tens of thousands across all the colonies. But we've saved the cultural heritage of 400 civilizations. To us, that's a fair trade." Vexthar looked at the humans around him with new respect and horror. They appeared to be simple colonists, but each one was carrying the memories and consciousness patterns of extinct alien species. They were living libraries, preserving the galaxy's lost civilizations at the cost of their own sanity and lives. The next day brought a crisis that showed the Zephyrians just how dangerous the preservation process could be. Dr. Kethran was visiting the agricultural labs with Maya Patel when alarms began sounding throughout the colony. Maya's face went pale as she listened to the emergency communications. "What's happening?" Kethran asked. "Memory cascade," Maya said, already running toward the door. "Someone's having a complete breakdown." They rushed to the medical center, where they found Grace Kelly strapped to a bed, her body convulsing while she screamed in languages that didn't sound human. Her eyes were wide with terror, but she seemed to be seeing things that weren't there. She's experiencing simultaneous memory bleeds from all 12 species she carries. Dr. Kate Williams explained as she tried to sedate Grace. "Her consciousness is fragmenting." Grace's voice changed rapidly as different alien personalities fought for control. She spoke in the clicking language of the Korthal, then switched to the harmonic tones of the Veltar, then to sounds no human throat should have been able to make. "The crystal forests are burning," she screamed in perfectly clear galactic standard. "The nest mothers are calling for evacuation." "No, wait. This already happened. They're already dead. They're all dead." Sam Brooks, the psychologist, worked frantically at a control panel. "I'm trying to isolate the memory bleeds, but they're cascading too fast. Each alien memory is triggering others." Grace's body went rigid as another personality took control. "Mathematical harmony requires the sacrifice of individual consciousness for the greater pattern," she said in a voice that sounded ancient and wise. "But the pattern is broken. The destroyers have come, and all equations end in zero." "Grace, listen to my voice," Kate said firmly. "Focus on human memories. Remember your childhood. Remember Earth. Earth." Grace's voice became confused and young. "Earth is gone. We evacuated Earth when the scouts came. Mother cried when we left the blue skies behind." Then her expression changed again, becoming alien and predatory. "Hunt, kill, consume the weak. The prey species must be eliminated before they." She began struggling against the restraints within human strength. "That's the Morgeth memories," Sam explained to the watching Zephyrians. "They were evolved predators. When their consciousness patterns surface, humans can become violent." It took 3 sedatives and 2 hours before Grace finally fell unconscious. When the crisis passed, Kate explained what had happened. "Grace has been a preservation specialist for 15 years, she said tiredly. "She's carried more alien consciousness patterns than almost anyone. But the psychological strain is finally breaking her mind apart." "Will she recover?" asked Dr. Kethran. "Maybe partially," Sam replied. "But she'll never be able to carry alien memories again. And she'll probably never be completely human again either." They visited Paul Davis later that day and found him in a similar but more controlled state. He was sitting in his quarters, talking quietly to empty air in multiple alien languages. "Paul," Maya knocked gently on his doorframe. Paul looked up, and his eyes showed the same depth and strangeness they had seen in Grace. "Maya, good. I need to tell someone about the mathematics of consciousness preservation. The Yithmore equations are elegant, but they require quantum coherence across multiple dimensional matrices." "Paul, that's not human knowledge." "Human?" Paul laughed, but it sounded wrong. "I haven't been purely human for years. I carry 14 different species, Maya. Sometimes I forget which thoughts originated in my birth brain." He stood and walked to a wall covered with complex mathematical formulas written in multiple alien scripts. The Feltar discovered that consciousness can be stored in crystalline matrices, but the Zeth Kara proved that temporal displacement affects memory coherence. When you combine their theories... Paul, your memory bleeding again. Paul paused and touched his head. Am I? It's getting harder to tell. The boundaries between the stored personalities are dissolving. He sat down heavily. Sometimes I wake up and don't know what species I am. Yesterday, I spent 2 hours trying to communicate with the colony's computers using Ythmore hive mind protocols. Maya sat beside him. We're going to reduce your preservation load. You're carrying too many species. No, Paul said firmly, his voice becoming more human. The work is too important. If I stop carrying these cultures, they die completely. But you're dying too. Paul looked at her with eyes that held the wisdom and sadness of 14 extinct civilizations. I know, but my death only kills one consciousness. If I stop preservation work, 14 species disappear forever. That evening, the Zephyrians attended a colony council meeting where the humans discussed their preservation work. The meeting was unlike anything Vexthar had ever seen. About 40 humans sat in a circle, but their behavior was strange. Some of them spoke in alien languages to empty air. Others sat perfectly still, apparently listening to voices only they could hear. A few showed signs of the personality shifts they had witnessed in Grace and Paul. The Korthal memories are particularly strong today, reported one woman. I'm having trouble maintaining human emotional responses. The Veltar preservation is stable, said a man whose voice had an unusual harmonic quality. But their aesthetic sensibilities are bleeding through. I keep wanting to rebuild the colony according to their architectural principles. Jake Mitchell ran the meeting with the skill of someone used to dealing with people whose minds contain multiple species. Who needs psychological support this week? Several hands went up. Jake made notes about scheduling therapy sessions and adjusting medication dosages. Any new refugee contacts? He asked. A young man named Chris Taylor raised his hand. I've been receiving dreams from the Nexera system. I think there's a civilization there that needs preservation. Dreams? Asked Captain Vexthar. Jake turned to explain. Sometimes the alien consciousness patterns we carry can detect distress signals from their former species mates. It's not scientifically understood, but it's happened enough times that we take these dreams seriously. We'll prepare a preservation team, Sam Brooks added. But Chris, you're already carrying 8 species. Taking on a 9th might be dangerous. I can handle it, Chris insisted, but his eyes showed the same strain they had seen in other preservation specialists. After the meeting, Nick Turner walked with the Zephyrians back to their quarters. Now you understand why we've been secretive about our work. Most species will consider what we do to be a form of insanity. It might be, Dr. Ketteran said honestly. Yes, Nick agreed, but it's necessary insanity. Every human in this colony is slowly losing their individual identity to preserve the collective identity of extinct species. How do you justify asking people to make such a sacrifice? Nick stopped walking and looked up at the stars. Because the alternative is complete cultural extinction. When a species dies naturally, they usually leave behind some traces, ruins, artifacts, genetic material. But whatever is destroying these civilizations erases them completely. Without human preservation, they would never have existed at all. But your people are suffering terribly. Yes, and that suffering is getting worse as we carry more species, and as the psychological strain accumulates over years of preservation work. They reached the guest quarters, but Nick continued talking. Captain Vexthar, we're going to ask something difficult of you and your people soon. When we do, please remember that every human in this colony has already sacrificed their sanity and identity to preserve galactic civilization. What are you going to ask us? Nick's expression was grave. To make the same choice we made. To choose between your physical existence and your cultural survival. You think the Zephyrian civilization is in danger? I think it's an immediate danger, Nick replied. And based on our experience with 400 previous cases, I think you have very little time to decide what parts of your civilization you want to preserve. As Nick walked away, Captain Vexthar realized that the humans weren't just showing them their preservation work out of friendship. They were preparing the Zephyrians for the same terrible choice that every other species had eventually faced. The The question was whether Zephyrian civilization would choose to die physically to survive culturally, or risk disappearing completely when the destroyers arrived. The truth about what was destroying galactic civilizations came the next morning, when Luke Stevens, the colony's defense coordinator, received an urgent message. He immediately called for Jake Mitchell and the other colony leaders to meet in the command center. Captain Vexthar and his crew were invited to attend, and what they learned changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. "We've got scouts," Luke announced grimly, pointing to a display showing the outer edges of the star system. 3 ships, unknown design, conducting systematic scans of every planet. Dr. Kethran studied the sensor readings. "I don't recognize the technology. What species builds ships like that?" "No species," Emma Hayes replied quietly. Emma was the colony's military advisor, a woman with steel gray hair and hard eyes. "Those are Void Seeker vessels." Void Seekers. Captain Vexthar had never heard the term before. Jake Mitchell pulled up historical files on the main display. "Captain, what we're about to tell you is the most closely guarded secret in the galaxy. The civilizations that have been disappearing aren't being destroyed by wars or natural disasters. They're being hunted by something that came from beyond our galaxy." The display showed images that made Vexthar's blood run cold. Dark ships with impossible geometries that seemed to bend space around them. Planets stripped bare of all life, their surfaces covered with strange geometric patterns. Entire star systems where the suns had been somehow drained of energy. "The Void Seekers appeared about 1,200 years ago," Emma explained. "They came from the space between galaxies, moving in a slow but systematic pattern of destruction." "What do they want?" asked Navigator Kixel. "We don't think they want anything," Luke replied. "They seem to exist purely to eliminate sentient life. Every civilization they encounter is completely destroyed, not just killed, but erased from existence." Dr. Zixera studied the images. "These patterns on the dead planets, were they?" "We think they're some kind of processing marks," Emma said. "The Void Seekers don't just destroy civilizations. They seem to harvest something from them. Consciousness, life energy, maybe the very concept of existence itself." Jake brought up a galactic map, showing the slow progression of destroyed systems. They move through space in a predictable pattern, taking about 50 to 100 years to completely process each star system they visit. "That's why we started the preservation program," Nick Turner added, entering the command center. "When the first human explorers encountered Void Seeker aftermath sites, we realized that entire civilizations were being erased so completely that no trace of them remained. But how do humans survive when these Void Seekers arrive?" Captain Vexthar asked. Emma pulled up another set of files. "We don't fight them. We can't fight them. Human military forces tried direct confrontation exactly once. 200 years ago, an entire battle fleet was destroyed in minutes. Then how?" "We hide," Luke said simply. "Humans discovered that the Void Seekers hunt by detecting complex technological signatures and large population centers. Small, primitive-looking settlements don't attract their attention." The display showed images of human colonies that looked exactly like New Haven. Simple buildings, basic technology, small populations living quiet agricultural lives. "Every human colony is designed to look primitive from space," Jake explained. "We bury our advanced technology underground and maintain the appearance of early-stage civilization. But what about Earth?" Dr. Kethran asked. "Your home world." Emma's expression became grim. "Earth was evacuated 200 years ago when Void Seeker scouts entered the Sol system. The entire human population, 12 billion people, was scattered across thousands of hidden colonies like this one." 12 billion people? Vexthar was stunned. "Where are they all?" "Everywhere," Nick replied. "Hidden colonies in remote star systems across the galaxy. Each one looks like a simple settlement of a few thousand people. But collectively we preserve human civilization and the cultural heritage of over 400 extinct species." Luke pointed to new readings on his sensors. "Which brings us to our immediate problem. Those Void Seeker scouts aren't just randomly exploring. They're following the trail of refugee populations." "What do you mean?" "When a civilization realizes the Void Seekers are coming, Some of them try to flee to other star systems. The scouts track these refugee movements to find species that are trying to hide. Emma activated a communication panel. We've been monitoring Void Seeker transmissions for decades. They're not random destroyers. They're systematic hunters. They study each species they find and adapt their techniques to find others. They're getting better at detecting hidden populations, Jake added. Colonies that would have been safe 50 years ago are being discovered now. The display showed tracking data that made Captain Vexthar's skin turn pale. This trajectory, they're moving toward Zephyrian space. Yes, Emma confirmed. Based on their current pattern, Void Seeker forces will reach the outer edges of your empire in approximately 40 to 60 years. And the core worlds? Maybe 100 years, Luke said, but that's assuming they maintain their current pace. They've been accelerating their expansion recently. Dr. Kethran studied the data with growing horror. Our military forces, could we fight them? You could try, Emma replied. But we've seen what happens when advanced civilizations attempt military resistance. The Mordak Empire had a fleet of 50,000 warships. The Void Seekers destroyed them in 3 days. The Korthal tried to hide their entire civilization in underground cities, Nick added. The Void Seekers found them anyway and stripped their planets down to bedrock. The Yithmor were a hive mind spanning multiple star systems, Paul Davis said, and in the command center. His voice carried the strange harmonic quality of the extinct species he preserved. They thought their distributed consciousness would protect them. The Void Seekers consumed every individual mind in their collective. Captain Vexthar felt overwhelmed by the implications. So the choice is hide or die. Essentially, yes, Jake replied. But hiding isn't enough anymore. The Void Seekers are getting better at finding concealed populations, which is why we developed the preservation protocol. Emma explained, when hiding fails, we can preserve a civilization's cultural essence in human neural networks. The process we showed you, Nick said, downloading an entire species' consciousness patterns into human minds. Luke's sensors chimed with new alerts. The scouts are moving closer. They'll reach this planet in about 6 hours. Are we in danger? Asked Navigator Kixel. Not immediately, Emma replied. This colony is designed to look primitive, and we've had practice hiding from Void Seeker scouts before. But your ship in orbit is a problem. Captain Vexthar realized the danger. The stellar wind has advanced technology that would attract their attention. Yes, you'll need to move your ship to the far side of the system and power down all non-essential systems, Luke instructed. Make it look like a dead hulk or natural asteroid. As the Zephyrian prepared to return to their ship, Jake made his final revelation. Captain, when you report this to your government, you need to understand something important. This isn't just about your species or mine. What do you mean? The Void Seekers aren't just expanding randomly. They're systematically eliminating all sentient life in this galaxy. Every civilization, every species, every form of consciousness. Why? Emma's expression was grave. We don't know, but we think they're preparing this galaxy for something. When they're finished, there won't be any intelligent life left anywhere, except for what humans have preserved, Nick added quietly, as they hurried toward their shuttle. Captain Vexthar understood why the humans had revealed their secrets. The Zephyrian Empire was about to face the same choice that 400 other civilizations had already faced. Fight and die completely, or trust human strangers to preserve fragments of their culture in the minds of people who were slowly going insane from carrying too many alien memories. The question was whether Zephyrian civilization would still exist in any meaningful way after being stored in human neural networks, or whether preservation was just another form of extinction. 6 months after the Zephyrian first contact with New Haven, Captain Vexthar found himself facing the most difficult decision in his species' history. The stellar wind had returned to Zephyrian space, carrying news that would shake their civilization to its core. The Zephyrian High Council had listened to his reports with growing alarm. The existence of the Void Seekers, the systematic destruction of galactic civilizations, and humanity's desperate preservation efforts were almost too much to comprehend. But now, as emergency alarms sounded across the Zephyrian homeworld, the abstract threat had become terrifyingly real. Sir, His communications officer reported, "We're receiving emergency transmissions from the outer colonies. Unidentified ships are attacking our border systems." Vextar studied the tactical displays with a sick feeling in his stomach. The attacking vessels matched the Void Seeker ships that humans had described. Dark, angular craft that seemed to absorb light and bend space around them. "How many ships?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. The scout fleets are reporting that their sensors can't get accurate counts. The enemy vessels seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." The main display showed the devastating effectiveness of the Void Seeker assault. Zephyrian defense platforms that had protected the border for centuries were being destroyed in minutes. Entire colonies were going silent as their populations were systematically eliminated. "Admiral," called the tactical officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from a human colony at New Haven." Jake Mitchell's face appeared on the screen, his expression grave. "Captain Vextar, we've been monitoring the Void Seeker attack on your territory. I'm sorry, but they've accelerated their timeline." "How long do we have?" Vextar asked. "Based on their current speed, they'll reach your core systems in weeks, not years. They must have detected the contact between our species and decided to move faster." Admiral Kexran, the Zephyrian military commander, leaned forward. "What are our options?" "The same options every species has faced," Jake replied sadly. "Fight and be completely destroyed, or allow us to preserve your civilization's essence." "How many of our people could you save?" "Physically? None. The preservation process requires the death of the physical body. But we could preserve your cultural consciousness, your way of thinking, your entire civilization's knowledge and experience." The High Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Council leader Kelvoth spoke first. "You're asking us to choose extinction of our bodies to preserve our minds?" "I'm asking you to choose between complete extinction and cultural survival," Jay corrected. "The Void Seekers leave nothing behind. No ruins, no artifacts, no genetic material. Species they destroy are erased from existence as if they never existed." Dr. Kedran, who had accompanied Vextar back to Zephyrian space, activated another display. "Council members, I've studied the human preservation facilities. They currently maintain the cultural heritage of 427 extinct civilizations." 427? Kelvoth was stunned. "The number keeps growing," Jake said. "We've received 36 new refugee species just in the past 6 months. The Void Seeker expansion is accelerating across the entire galaxy." Admiral Kexran studied tactical projections. "Our combined fleet is 200,000 ships strong. Could we not fight?" "The Veltar Empire had 400,000 ships," Jake replied. "They lasted 4 days. The Mordak had 500,000 ships and the most advanced weapons technology in the galaxy. They lasted 6 days. But surely our defensive positions..." "The Yithmor built their entire civilization inside heavily shielded star systems," interrupted a voice from the transmission. Paul Davis appeared beside Jake, his eyes showing the telltale depth of someone carrying multiple alien consciousness patterns. "I carry their memories," Paul continued, his voice taking on alien harmonics. "They believe their technological superiority and defensive preparations would protect them. The Void Seekers consumed their entire hive mind in a single coordinated assault." Council leader Kelvoth asked the question everyone was thinking. "If we chose preservation, what would happen to us? What would Zephyrian consciousness be like in human minds?" Nick Turner joined the transmission from New Haven. "Your cultural patterns would be downloaded into specially prepared human volunteers. Your way of thinking, your emotions, your understanding of mathematics and art and philosophy, all of it would be preserved. But we would be dead." "Your bodies would be dead," Nick corrected. "But your consciousness patterns would live on in human neural networks. You would experience reality through human senses, but with Zephyrian perspectives and memories." Dr. Zixera, who had also returned with Vextar, added her observations. "I've studied their preservation subjects. The humans carrying alien consciousness patterns seem to genuinely experience life as multiple species simultaneously. At great cost to their sanity," Admiral Kexran pointed out. "Yes," Jake admitted, The psychological strain is enormous. Many of our preservation specialists suffer from identity displacement, memory bleeding, and psychological fracturing. Some have died from the stress. But, added Grace Kelly, appearing on screen despite her obvious mental strain, we carry the complete cultural heritage of species that would otherwise be forgotten forever. The Korthal appreciation for crystal harmonics, the Veltar understanding of dimensional mathematics, the Mordak warrior philosophies. Her voice shifted, taking on alien inflections. Through us, they still experience wonder at the beauty of triple sunsets. They still solve mathematical equations that push the boundaries of understanding. They still create art that expresses concepts no single species can imagine alone. The emergency sirens continue to sound as more Zephyrian colonies fell to the Void Seeker assault. Time was running out for any decision. How many humans would be needed to preserve our entire civilization? Kelvoth asked. For a complete cultural preservation? About 50,000 volunteers, Nick replied. But we have over 200,000 humans across our colonies who have volunteered for preservation duty. They volunteered to go insane? They volunteered to keep galactic civilization alive, Jay corrected. Every human in our preservation program knows the risks. We consider an honor to serve as living libraries for extinct species. Captain Vexthar looked around a council chamber at his people's leaders. These were individuals who had guided Zephyrian civilization for decades, making decisions that affected billions of lives. There's something else you should know, Jake added. The preservation program isn't just about storing dead civilizations. We're also working toward restoration. Restoration? Someday, when the Void Seeker threat passes, we hope to use the preserved consciousness patterns to rebuild the extinct species. Clone bodies, artificial intelligence matrices, whatever technology makes it possible. You think the threat will pass? We have to believe it will. Emma Hayes said, joining the transmission. The Void Seekers seem to be following a pattern, systematically clearing this galaxy of intelligent life. When they're finished, they might move on to other galaxies. And leave this one empty? Empty of original inhabitants, Emma confirmed. But not empty of consciousness. The preserved species could be restored to physical form and rebuild their civilizations. The tactical displays showed Void Seeker forces penetrating deeper into Zephyrian space. They had perhaps 72 hours before the enemy reached the homeworld. We need a decision, Admiral Kexran said urgently. Council leader Kelvoth stood slowly. This is the most difficult choice our species has ever faced. To die as ourselves or live as memories in alien minds. Not alien, Grace Kelly said softly, her voice switching between human and Korthal inflections. Family. We become family, sharing thoughts and experiences across species boundaries. The preserved civilizations in our minds don't feel alien to us anymore, Paul Davis added. They feel like different aspects of a larger consciousness. Humanity has become a collective memory for the galaxy. As Void Seeker ships appeared on the edge of the home system, the Zephyrian High Council made their choice. They would trust humanity to preserve their civilization's essence, hoping that someday Zephyrian consciousness could be restored to physical form. The evacuation began immediately. Zephyrian volunteers traveled to human colonies across the galaxy, where their consciousness patterns were carefully downloaded into human neural networks. The process was terrifying and beautiful. Physical death followed by awakening in human minds that suddenly contained Zephyrian memories, emotions, and ways of understanding reality. Captain Vexthar was among the last to undergo preservation. As his consciousness faded from his dying Zephyrian body, he felt his memories and personality patterns being absorbed into the mind of a human volunteer named Chris Taylor. When he awakened, he was experiencing reality through human senses but with Zephyrian perspective. He could feel Chris's human memories alongside his own Zephyrian experiences. But he could also sense something else, the preserved consciousness patterns of other extinct species that Chris carried. For the first time, Vexthar understood what humanity had become. They weren't just preserving extinct civilizations. They had become a metaspecies, a collective consciousness that contained the cultural heritage of hundreds of different ways of thinking and experiencing reality. As he settled into his new existence in Chris's mind, Vexthar realized that humanity had made the ultimate sacrifice. They had given up their individual human identity to become living repositories for galactic civilization. And someday, when the galaxy was safe again, the preserved species might be restored to physical form. But humanity would forever remain the guardians of memory, the keepers of consciousness, the species that chose to carry the burden of an entire galaxy's worth of dreams and hopes and ways of being. In the end, humans hadn't just survived the destruction of galactic civilization. They had become the immune system that would allow it to eventually recover and rebuild. The Void Seekers might destroy planets and bodies, but they couldn't destroy the consciousness patterns preserved in human minds. As long as humanity survived, the galaxy civilizations would endure, waiting for their chance to live again among the stars.